Hello everyone, Lucas Mackintosh here and welcome back to my retro game room. This is the place where I look at the underrated, the unloved, the strange and the obscure retro offerings from video games past and see whether they are really all that bad and if they really deserve all the hate given to them over the years. On the show today, it's an aquatic double bill as I take a trip down the sewers with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the Nintendo Entertainment System and go halfway around the world to find Huey, Dewey and Louie in the Lucky Dime Caper for the Sega Master System. Both games have received a ton of criticism over the years, with TMNT being the most notorious out of the two. Whilst the Lucky Dime Caper also has its fair share of difficulties and hate, I do remember playing both games as a kid. I did find them to be balls to the wall in difficulty, but I did kind of also have a fondness for both titles at the same time, and this was despite never really being able to get far in them. I still however remember having fun, and the concept of a bad game didn't really enter my mind at the time. If there were any flaws, I was blissfully ignorant to them as a little Lucas. However, having seen many reviews blasting these games, I feel now is the time to go back in time, take off my nostalgia goggles and put both games under the microscope to test their worth and whether they are just misunderstood unique classic platformers ahead of their time. Also, with both games only being available on their respective systems and being drastically different yet sharing some similarities, I kinda want to see which title is the best and if I can convince anyone hating these games to perhaps give them another try. So without further ado, let's get this 8-bit battle started. Released in 1989 to coincide with the first wave of the Turtles cartoon series, TMNT for the Nintendo Entertainment System was developed by Ultra Games, who were just another branch of Konami. At the time there was a limit to how many games each developer could make for Nintendo, and so to get around this obstacle, Konami created Ultra Games and released TMNT under that name. This first Turtles offering for the NES puts you in control of all four Ninja Turtle teens: Leonardo, the fearless leader who uses twin katana blades, Donatello, who is not only a master of the bow staff but he is also an inventor, Raphael, the side-twirling wisecracking turtle, and finally Party Dude Michelangelo, the laid-back pizza-obsessed turtle who uses nunchucks. All four are on a mission to once again stop the evil Ninja Master Shredder and his Foot Clan throughout New York City. This time however the heroes in a half shell have learned that old Shredhead has possession of a mutagenic gun, which has the power to restore any mutated creatures back to their old forms. If the teens can get their hands on this weapon, then it may be possible to turn their Master Splinter back to human form. So the Turtles must work their way through the city, meeting some old and new faces, rescuing April O'Neil, putting a stop to Bebop and Rocksteady, and slicing and dicing their way through the many sewers and areas to find the Technodrome to find and defeat Shredder. So grab yourself a pizza and let's check out this first Turtle outing for the NES. Gameplay for this game. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the NES is a 2D side-scrolling platform game which allows the player to play as any one of the four ninja teens as they fight their way from the sewers of New York to the streets above. Where this game differs from most is that by pressing start in the game brings up a menu in which you can switch between each turtle on the fly and use their slight skill variance to deal with the many enemy obstacles in their path. The main objectives are to navigate the overworld map of New York and try and achieve each of the game's objectives in turn. These range from rescuing kidnapped allies, defeating bosses in mini-boss battles, collecting weapons to help further progression to the game, bomb disposal in the Hudson River, and even driving the turtle van to help our heroes collect missiles and ropes to find their Master Splinter. Each turtle has an individual health bar, and if damage is received from an enemy or hazard, then this will diminish gradually. Take too much damage and your turtle will disappear from the menu, and you can choose another one and hopefully find your fallen comrade nearby and relay him back into the team. Each turtle can use their respective weapons and come in two categories. Leonardo and Donatello are both long-range fighters. This means that their weapons can be used easily from a distance to take out some enemies, whilst Raphael and Michelangelo are short-range fighters. So despite only being able to take out enemies close up, their attacks are surprisingly powerful. So it is best to switch the turtles constantly to find the one that will deal with the right situation effectively. Most of the action comprises of foot soldiers and other random enemies that the turtles will encounter. With practice, our ninja protagonists will be able to slice them up in no time. However, the enemies in this game respawn whenever the turtles defeat them, and this means that you must be cautious and take your time. Whilst it is tempting to play out your TMNT fantasies and take it to the never-ending army of misfits, it will only get you killed quicker. And so the game throws you many random enemy patterns whenever you enter a new area, meaning that the quest to end Shredder's reign of terror rarely allows for a tea break. There are, however, some power-ups available that the foursome can collect once a certain number of enemies has been killed. These range from ninja stars, boomerangs and other projectiles, and so if you collect weapons for an individual turtle, it will stay with that one. If Leo picks up ninja stars, then only he will be able to use them. However, you can't equip all your turtles with weapons, and so this game is almost like a strategy platform one, in which you must manage each one individually, ensuring their health is topped up with precious slices of pizza dotted about each area, and ensuring that they don't get captured. The game's overworld has you try and plot a course for the game, but this can be tricky as steamrollers and other enemy obstacles can easily wipe them out. So, as each area is completed, the further your team can progress. For example, defeat Bebop and then you can have access to the building where April O'Neil is being held for a showdown with Rocksteady. From here you must then ensure that bombs hidden beneath the Hudson River are disarmed. The gameplay only really changes up a little. For example, on the overworld your turtle can use his weapon, but again you can easily get run over by steamrollers. Once enough progress has been made, then you will have access to the turtle van, which will allow the player to fight back and at least be a little safer. Essentially you have three gameplay styles: overworld, platforming and swimming, which to be honest is only really one level. It is not only defeating enemies that will ensure success. As I mentioned earlier, the green team must also find missiles to destroy barricades to allow them further penetration into New York, and also rope to allow them to get across multiple buildings. Luckily these items are not that hard to find, but some of the turtles' platforming involves tricky mid-air jumps and trying to land on some uneven platforms with a plethora of non-stop enemies which can seriously mess up your progress. This is where some of the problems with this game really come to the forefront. No matter what sewer you're in, the baddies just keep on respawning, and this is seriously unfair and is where most of the hate for this game comes from. The turtles barely stand a chance, and an unassuming player, myself included, could get wiped out pretty much straight away. This wouldn't be that bad to contend with, but with some of the overworld sections you drive through, they're just seriously confusing, and they can be total guesswork as to where to go next. Especially for first time players, and whilst you're trying to figure all this out, you are constantly being attacked from above, leaving you almost no time to think. Try as I might, I just couldn't get very far, and so against my better judgment I popped in the Game Genie in order to try and get this review done. With almost infinite health and double missile pickups, the struggle became less and less. However, even with using these codes, it was still no walk in the park. Anyone who has played Castlevania will tell you that when Simon Belmont gets hit, he gets knocked back. And yes, you guessed it, Konami decided to implement the same mechanic for the turtles. If you take a hit, you get knocked back, whether using cheat codes or not, and this makes progress almost impossible, and with other hazards such as spikes and fire becoming prominent later, if you're not careful, you will end up as turtle soup. I seriously wanted to play this legitimately, but realised that the overwhelming nature of the game is enough to make me want to turn off the game, so to give this game a decent analysis, I had no choice but to cheat. Another annoyance is one which many TMNT players constantly talk about, and that is the dreaded underwater stage. Our heroes have a limited amount of time to swim through a dangerous area disarming bombs placed by the Foot Clan. The controls here are just awful, and you really must tap the button fast enough to lift your chosen protagonist high enough. You see, everything down here can kill you. We have instant death seaweed that grabs you and can seriously ruin your progress, electric seaweed which is almost everywhere, blades and even timed electrical charges which appear and disappear. Whilst it's not the worst swimming level I've encountered in a video game, and to be honest, after a few tries it is possible, I just found it seriously unfair and not a good omen for what was ahead. After that debacle, the fearsome fighting teens return home to their lair when Shredder appears on their TV, naturally. stating that he has taken their beloved Master Splinter, and to get him back they must defeat the Foot Clan. So this is where a quest for missiles and rope begins, and where things can get very confusing, as you must navigate your turtle van around the city looking for the right buildings and the right sewers to find him. Not only that, but once the correct sewer is found, it can be a frustrating experience trying to jump across whilst taking out the many annoying flying enemies. If you fall into the sewage, then you are washed back out and must try again. At least you don't take any damage from all this, so it's not too bad. You must also make sure that all your turtles are fully powered up, as you are going to need every drop of health and every weapon you can get your hands on. Once Splinter is found, a boss battle with what looks like metal head and shoes, before you finally save your master. The problem with this battle being that if you fall off the roof, you must climb your way back and begin the fight again. Find Splinter, and then you have to search for the turtle blimp, which is somewhere at an airport. So why oh why do they have to search for their own blimp? I mean, didn't Donatello make it? Wouldn't he have hidden it somewhere that only the turtles would find? And why would they even decide to hide it in the airport anyway? It beggars belief. Nevertheless, once again the teenagers must go through more rooftops and underground sections, as well as take out a giant Mouser to eventually find it. The final part is the most frustrating, as the search for the Technodrome begins. Why, so you ask? Well, the Technodrome is in a random location each time, and trying to find it is sometimes a game of chance. Plus, the path to it is blocked by deadly spiked enemies who can potentially dole out a ton of damage to the turtles, and if you go through one section and find that the Technodrome is not there, then you must fight your way back topside to try another route. This can lead to your turtle taking even more damage and potentially getting captured. One of the coolest but tensest moments is where the turtles must destroy the Technodrome in a climatic boss battle, in order to gain entry to try and find old Shredhead himself. After facing a tough barrage of baddies, lethal death traps and red herrings, the turtles finally meet up with Oroku Saki and the final battle begins. Luckily, if you have enough weapons at your disposal, or in my case a Game Genie, then he's about as threatening as a gaggle of baby geese. Defeat him, and the turtles get their hands on the mutagenic gun, save New York, and this means that Master Splinter can now return to human form. Graphics. Konami are well known for creating some gorgeous detailed sprites and backgrounds within an 8-bit environment, and once again have worked their magic for this first NES offering. All four turtles look and move well, with their signature weapons being present, so you will have no trouble identifying your favourite go-to turtle. From New York sewers to the Hudson River to the airport, this game shifts often from a top-down perspective to a 2D side-scrolling one throughout the game, and all areas are rich in colour, detailed, and it's easy to see what is happening. As good as everything looks, I will say that the game sometimes is its own worst enemy. As I mentioned, the many enemies that the turtles destroy for the game respawn constantly. This could be because Konami didn't want the action to stop and wanted to make you feel like a Ninja Turtle. Now this is all very fine and good, but there's just so much on the screen, and because of this the action slows down and only speeds up when a certain number of enemies have been defeated. I mean, it's bad enough that the game keeps forcing you to fight this never-ending horde of nasties, but the game won't handle multiple enemies on screen, and this can lead to slight delays in trying to get your chosen turtle to progress. Had Konami decided to perhaps not repeat enemy patterns, then this would have made things a little more balanced and caused less flickering on screen. This can also occur when the turtles are topside, just walking around or in the turtle van. Most of my favourite environments were inside the buildings, and I really liked the look of them. It was also really easy to differentiate between the different item pickups the turtles could collect, so I had no trouble identifying rope, missiles or ninja weapons. I do think the little animations when the turtles used projectile based weapons such as ninja stars and boomerangs were cool and looked epic. I also really liked the rooftop sections where the turtles would use the rope. It reminded me so much of the cartoon, and although only a minor touch, it was very well implemented. The enemies, although unfamiliar, also looked good. It was a bit puzzling as to why Konami opted to go with some generic baddies never seen in the Turtle universe. I know that Fireman, Chainsaw Man and those annoying flying creatures were not present in the cartoon, but I can only really assume that these creatures in the game are sent from Dimension X by Shredder or even Krang. Speaking of which, where is Krang? He is nowhere in the game, and this is very disappointing as he was a major part of the television show, dishing out orders to Shredder. Still, the in-game bosses look magnificent, especially that giant Mauser, and you do at least get to fight the Technodrome, so it's not all bad news. I really enjoyed fighting Bebop and Rocksteady, and I wish you could have encountered them a few more times throughout this first Turtle outing. There's only really a handful of things in this game that remind you of the cartoon, and if we didn't get anyone else, Konami could have at least given them new attack patterns to fight later on, before Shredder. Well, in all fairness, we must give Konami some slack because it was the first console game, and in later TMNT games almost everyone is included. Finally, this game has a good use of colours and animation effects, so when you hit something you really do. When you jump it's a little floaty, but a lot fluid than most platform characters I've played, and despite the niggles I've mentioned, it's a nice graphical representation of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In-game story and cutscenes. From the familiar Turtles title screen and character profiles, this looks and feels very familiar and is a really good use of making it just like the cartoon. Straight away you know just what is going on via cutscenes. April O'Neil has been kidnapped and you must go and find her. The story is very well told and could have come from the pages of a script or Turtle comic book. Although some may argue that the story is always the same, April is always being kidnapped, Shredder is trying to bring the Technodrome to the surface, and Bebop and Rocksteady are always present, I would say that pretty much describes an episode of the very first Turtles cartoon series, and that's exactly why we loved it. The story in the cutscenes is less light-hearted in tone and a lot more serious. There does not seem to be any turtle wisecracks or humour, and this I feel was a good decision. The idea that Shredder has a gun that could potentially reverse Splinter's condition may have been used before, but here it just fits in so well. Even after saving the Hudson River, the Turtles make their way home to find that Splinter has been kidnapped, and predictably Shredder appears on their TV and he looks like he has just been doing some training with Ivan Drago because he looked jacked to the max. Still, this only adds to the severity of the situation, making Shredder to be a much bigger threat than you remembered from the beloved cartoon series. The story is a huge motivator for the player to want to succeed and is paced progressively. After completing certain tasks, you will be well informed that you're on the right path. So I will say that perhaps not including all the Turtles' sayings and mannerisms places a massive focus on making the story work as a whole. I'm certainly not saying that the humour wouldn't be welcome, it certainly is in later video games, but I do feel its absence is necessary to set the tone for this game. Music. This is one area where the game really excels. There are some very well composed 8-bit chip tunes and I expect no less from Konami. The music really gets stuck in your head and despite it being reused, it never really becomes an annoyance. After playing this game for only an hour, I had the tracks lodged in my head for days. And I'm probably going to mess this up now, but Jun Funahashi's score quickly matches the fast-paced nature of the game and the sense of urgency in the many sections. My personal favourite has to be the underwater level music. Despite the turtles scrambling around, swimming all over this aquatic underwater nightmare defusing bombs, the music is surprisingly calming, and I found myself not trying to speed through the stage too much. Once again, although this is a Ninja Turtles game, the familiar cartoon theme is almost non-existent. I believe you do get a slight snippet of it here and there, but essentially this is all originally composed music for the game. It was certainly a brave move not to include it, as it is essentially what hooked in legions of small children to watch the cartoon. Konami, however, are well known for taking cartoon licensed games and putting their own spin on it, whilst at the same time working hard to add new music when necessary. Now, some games do need that familiar theme, such as Konami's Tiny Toon Adventures on the NES, but where necessary the company strive to make their own self-penned tracks fit into the ethos of each game that they would develop, and by doing so actually enhances the game. This serves to give it more of an epic appeal, and TMNT is no different, with each track perfectly matching the environments the turtles find themselves in. This gives each area its own identity and is just a joy to the ears. This game is worth it for the music alone in my opinion. It may be a frustration to play though, but the music kind of eases this a little and kind of motivates and spurs the player on to at least try again. Controls. The controls are serviceable and mostly responsive. Moving your chosen ninja teen around is easy enough, but I will say that jumping sometimes almost works against the player in some levels. Most times, particularly in the sewers, the turtles must make some tricky jumps across some hard to reach gaps, and the player movement needs to be ultra precise. The turtles can jump high enough, but certain jumps must be made by simply tapping the A button slightly rather than pushing it all the way down. This will ensure that your chosen protagonist has a much better probability of jumping across safely. On rooftops it becomes necessary to ensure that no enemies are in the way, as if they touch the turtles, and again this knocks them back and potentially off the roof where they must climb up again. B button allows the turtles to use their signature weapons, and if they pick up any additional sub weapons then tapping select will activate them. While start brings up the menu screen, allowing you to select your turtle and receive hints from either April or Splinter on what it is you should be doing. If there is one complaint, it would be in the Hudson River level, where you must frantically tap the A button to get your turtle to move upwards, and this can feel like a real effort. It is made more annoying with the fact that you have a strict time limit also. Slicing your enemies is at least decent however when you are on land, and it is very responsive, and despite some small issues with the jump mechanic, it is a game that is easy for anyone to get into. Overall, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the NES is a difficult first game to recommend. Whilst it does retain the look and feel of its cartoon counterpart, it is not as straightforward as people may think. I feel that part of the reason why is because you cannot play this game as you would a traditional platform game. As I said before, going in all guns blazing only results in your turtles suffering massive damage, and so you have to play this game very slowly and strategically. This means constantly monitoring your turtle's health and being very conservative, as well as topping the weakest up with pizza, collecting lots of sub-weapons, and having played this game enough times to know the layout. Whilst it is not a terrible first TMNT console game, some of the levels are unfair and unbalanced, and unless you know the strategy is the key to getting anywhere in this game, then it will shut you down fast. Some of the respawning enemy patterns are just highly annoying and make a tricky game even trickier. Not to mention when you finally get the turtle van, it can be hard to know which way you should be going. It's an extremely difficult game that will take players a bit of time to adjust to. Whilst this game can be beaten, at times it punishes you a little too much towards the end, and this is where the core of the frustration comes. You deal with enemies, you go slightly off screen and then they come back, and this can cause you unintentional damage. Also, finding the Technodrome near the end is unnecessary and cruel because it is random every time. So you find an entrance, go in, and then you have to deal with these deformed spiky creatures. If you somehow get past them and the Technodrome does not appear, then you will have backtracked for the respawning baddies, taking even more damage. Still, despite its issues, the game is somewhat at least playable and even rewards you often with health and sub-weapons. As I mentioned, it can be fun once you know this game well and what to expect. The music is top notch and the action is consistent. I do however highly recommend using a Game Genie to help you learn the path of the game. As I mentioned, I used one to do this review, and it's not so much that I wanted to cheat, I needed to figure out where to go without having my health drained every 5 seconds. By doing so, I played the game legitimately and can at least get it. Playing the game legitimately, I got a little bit further through the game than I could before, having learnt. After this, I tried to play the game legitimately and could at least get a little bit further through the game than I could before. If you're a fan of TMNT, then I will say go with number 2 and 3 instead. These two set the tone for what most of the series would become. However, if you really want to play this game, then it could be an incredibly steep learning curve. Younger players may find this game a little too much, but if you're a grizzled NES veteran who is used to extremely challenging gameplay, then you may garner some enjoyment from it. Okay, my final rating is 3.5 out of 5. Not the best Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game ever, but certainly not the worst. It does work well as a video game, but can be severely unfair and unbalanced. December of 1991 saw Sega release the Lucky Dime Caper for the Sega Master System. This was released in the hope that a game featuring everyone's favourite hot-tempered duck could do just as well as Mickey Mouse did in Castle of Illusion. That game not only turned out to be one of the Sega Mega Drive's best-selling and fondly remembered platform games, but Sega AMC would also create 8-bit versions for both the Master System and the Game Gear, which borrowed a few elements from their 16-bit counterpart but were much shorter in length. Still, the 8-bit versions helped thrust Mickey Mouse and Disney into the limelight, and it was hoped that the same could be done for Donald Duck. The Lucky Dime Caper puts the player firmly in the webbed feet of Donald. He is visiting Uncle Scrooge with his nephews Huey, Dewey and Louie. Scrooge is telling them the story of how he amassed such a large fortune, and he said it all started with one lucky dime. Hoping that the nephews can be as lucky as he was, he bestows upon them a lucky dime each and wishes them all the best. As Donald and his nephews are about to say their goodbyes to Scrooge, 3 crows swoop down and take the nephews along with their lucky dimes. Then, out of nowhere, Mackintosh'S makes a dramatic entrance and snatches Scrooge's lucky dime from his hands. She then proclaims that now she has Scrooge's dime, she will become even richer than him. Laughing manically, she then disappears, leaving Donald and Scrooge startled. Donald naturally wants to get his nephews back, but Scrooge, being extremely tight, wants his lucky dime. He persuades Donald to try and get it back along with the nephews and their respective dimes. If Donald can do this, then Scrooge promises Donald a huge reward. This motivates Donald and he rushes off in his plane to try and hunt for his nephews, the dimes, and to put a stop to the evil Mackintosh'S in her deadly castle. And so begins the Lucky Dime Caper for the Sega Master System. Gameplay. The Lucky Dime Caper starring Donald Duck is a 2D side-scrolling platform game in which you control the protagonist Donald through 7 individual stages. Donald can jump on enemies and across platforms and is even equipped with a weapon which he can use to defend himself against the many foes encountered. He starts off this game wielding a large hammer but can acquire frisbees later on. Unfortunately, Donald cannot have both at the same time, but he is able to change to one either at various points throughout the adventure. Donald can also only take 2 hits before biting the bullet. One hit will take away his weapon, and unless he can find another one, then he is very vulnerable and can only really jump on baddies. If he takes one more, then he will lose a life and must try again from the last checkpoint, or if no lives are left, continue from the start of the last level he was on. There are a few more items Donald can collect, such as small and large gems which give him a score bonus. Extra lives can be found, as well as star boxes. As he collects these star power-ups, a meter appears showing how many he has found. They allow him to swing his hammer and use his frisbees at a much faster rate. If he can find 5 star boxes, then Donald will become invincible, giving him some precious seconds to defeat the baddies and progress a little further. Donald is also timed throughout each stage, and this is represented by different coloured bars on the bottom of the screen. Thankfully, this time limit is more than generous and resets whenever Donald reaches a new area within the level. Power-ups appear after Donald defeats 2 enemies and is totally random every time. Enemies also respawn whenever Donald moves away from the enemies he has just defeated, so great care must be taken. From the map screen, Donald is given a choice of 3 locations to visit, each with a nephew's icon on it. Once all 3 have been rescued, a further 3 levels are then granted to Donald, and he can again choose where he would like to go first. So the highly strung mallard must work his way through each level, bouncing or hitting enemies, jumping across deadly pits, dealing with horrendous stage hazards and tricky enemy patterns, and also occasionally having to find keys later on. Once Donald has met all the requirements within a stage, he must then defeat a boss character, each with their own unique attack pattern. Once this is achieved, our hero can then complete the level and rescue the nephew or find the dime. Once all 6 levels have been completed on the map screen, a 7th location, Magica's castle, opens up, and it is here that Donald must complete the level and defeat Magica to finally get his hands on Scrooge's lucky dime and said reward. This is another title that must be played at a much slower pace than a lot of platform games you are used to. Not only because the enemies can respawn if Donald wanders off screen, but because the hit detection is really bad here. Donald must be ultra precise when jumping on an enemy in order to defeat it. If he is a slight frame off, then the game counts it as him taking damage. The same can be said when he swings his hammer. This must be done with rhythmic timing, as if you don't hit the enemy precisely within the animation framing correctly, then again Donald will just take damage. Once he earns star boxes, then this speeds up the use of the weapon, so it becomes less of a problem however. The game does take quite a while to adjust and feel comfortable using Donald. Some of the levels are just a little too unstructured for Donald's abilities, and with the enemy patterns being extremely manic, this can easily catch the player out. So let's take a look at the levels Donald will be visiting. The Northern Woods. This level is a perfect way to start. It is jolly and has a happy vibe about it. You can select any of the other 2 levels available first, but this is the unofficial first level of the game, and I do recommend starting here right away, as it allows the player to get to have a little space and time and to get to grips with Donald. There are a few pits to avoid, trampoline sections which require timing to get through, and deadly long jumps, as well as bees, spiders and mushrooms patrolling around. However, it's possible here to defeat 2 enemies, grab a power up and have them respawn in order to get more. If you're having trouble with this level, then you might want to use this trick to get 5-star boxes, which will grant him temporarily invincibility. The heroic duck must also make use of mole leaf lifts to progress upwards and swing through to the end of the level on some vines to meet the first boss. The first guardian is an angry bear with a beehive on his head being followed by a single bee. Luckily this bee is harmless and nothing more than a distraction. The bear will rush Donald and occasionally jump at him and throw projectiles. However, you can easily dispense with this boss by bopping him on the head, by jumping, or by using your hammer or frisbee. Again, if you intend to whack him with your hammer, it's best to do it as precisely as you can, as once again this game will count it as a hit if you are a frame off. Once the bear has been defeated, the level ends and Donald rescues Louie, and it's on to the next level. The Great American Forest. This is where the stakes really start to raise in the level department, and is in many ways an indication of how the rest of the game will play out. The Great American Forest is chock full of bottomless pits and annoying snakes who will jump and occasionally move left and right to try and catch out poor Donald. Add to this leaping fish and projectiles, throwing birds litter the stage also, and poor Donald must manoeuvre his way carefully through all of this carnage. There will also be a strong reliance on using turtles to give the stressed out duck a lift throughout certain sections of this level also. What a coincidence, I've just done a review on the Tmnt game for the NES, and Donald must use turtles in this game also. How cool is that? Towards the middle of the level, Donald must traverse down a tricky waterfall chock full of enemies before swimming frantically for a short underwater section to continue his journey. Essentially, this level doesn't really have much variation, and so much focus is placed on Donald to avoid or take down the enemies. At the end of the stage is a ferocious lion who can jump and leap towards Donald. When he is leaping, he cannot be hurt. You must wait until he has stopped leaping before hitting him with a hammer or using a frisbee. If you are having trouble with this boss, a safer way is to climb up to one of the tree branches where Donald is relatively safe and wait until the lion has leaped up before jumping on his head, then quickly return to the branch. This method may take slightly longer, but again you have to time it to perfection because you need to hit him right after he has leaped. If you are a few milliseconds off, then the game once again counts it as a hit. Once the lion has been permanently tamed, however, it's time to rescue Dewey and prepare for the third stage, which is the hardest so far. The Andes Mountains. This time Donald is high up in the Andes and must not only test his might against an assortment of new and dangerous enemies, but he must also contend with tricky slopes, stage hazards, bottomless pits, and also a tricky temple. If you thought the forest was tough, then you haven't seen anything yet. The main enemies on this stage are made up of mask-wielding, club-throwing tribesmen who remind me of Oompa Loompas, jumping pots, birds that drop what only can be described as either hard green jelly or green fruit pastels, and stone cubes that spit out more tribesmen and pots inside the temple. However, gaining access to this ancient ruin is easy, but leaving it can prove to be extremely difficult. Donald must deal with lots of these possessed stone tablets as well as moving blue block projectiles across a massive pit of spikes that need to be jumped over or avoided. This is one of the most infuriating stages on the game and will definitely test the gamer's patience, no doubt. Luckily, once Donald leaves the temple, there are only a few more hazards to deal with, including yet another boulder sloped obstacle and some angry baddies. If you can somehow make it to the end of the stage, then our feathered friend must take out the coolest set of bosses in this game, 2 possessed statues. Now these statues are constantly throwing huge stone projectiles, some of which are inflamed and cannot be touched. There are of course multiple ways to take down the statues, either by riding on the normal stones and then using their momentum to jump high and bash each statue on the head. You can also use frisbees, or the most simple and effective way I've found is to whack them a couple of times each with a hammer. If you time your movements just right and stand in the right spot, these boulders won't even hit you. Once the statues have been taken care of, there's just a matter of taking out the phantom spirit that possessed them. This is really simple despite its tricky pattern. Once this is done, Donald is halfway home as he's rescued little Huey and can now focus on finding those lucky dimes. The pyramids. Now there are 2 reasons why I did this level first. One, it's my favourite level due to the humorous mummified ducks and impressive pyramid that Donald can enter. Second, this level allows you to gain as many lives as you want. Although you can just kill 2 baddies in any stage, grab a power up, go off screen, rinse and repeat to get another one, this level allows you the ability to be able to re-enter any treasure room you find, repeatedly. In these rooms are several chests, some of which I like to call rogue ones who will try and take a bite out of Donald for being too greedy. Hey, I don't blame Donald one bit, this game is hard enough so he's going to need all the lives he can get. Anyway, simply keep destroying the chests with a power up and this cycles through them. Keep your eyes peeled for a life that appears, grab it, leave the room, re-enter and then repeat. On some occasions I have managed to get 2 lives per entry to the room, so if you're new to the game then use this opportunity to get lots of lives, as doing so will ensure you can get through most of it, if not all of Majika's castle, but it will also allow you to practice the tougher sections of the rest of the game, meaning that as you become more skilled this game will become a lot easier for you. Okay, so I thought I'd throw that in for you guys. Now Egypt consists of scorpions, bats, sinking sand dunes, cheeky snakes, pots, arrows, and Donald must bypass some falling blocks from the ceiling. Yes, there is this kind here, which isn't too bad, but just what I would expect from a typical 8-bit platform game. The developers decided to throw in massive ones just to keep you on your toes. It's like playing a game with Tetris, except you're moving Donald Duck out of the way. Thankfully this part is not too difficult and is only really done as a means of creating a staircase for Donald to get to the next floor of the pyramid. When he does this, he eventually comes to a locked door which requires a key as well as a few more treasure rooms. The key is not too hard to find, and once Donald has braved the nasties in this room, he gets his hands on it. However, here's where things get a little annoying. Whatever you do, once you have made up your mind to get the key, grab it and do not go into any other room, because going into a treasure room will mean that Donald automatically loses the key and he must get it again. So once you make up your mind to get the key, use it immediately on the locked door, and provided you have more than enough lives thanks to those treasure rooms, at least you can now concentrate on the boss fight, which is one of the crows flying menacingly above. This cheeky bird is playing a tune, hypnotising a giant cobra to do its bidding. As before, there's a few ways you can take care of this crafty crow. You can use your trademark weapon to ruffle his feathers. Despite the mallet being my go-to weapon for this game, I have kind of realised that the frisbee really does have its uses against these infernal birds. So just walk back and forth, chucking the frisbee up and hitting the crow, but stay out of the snake's way if you can. You can jump on the snake's head and use it as a platform, giving you extra height to jump on the crow's head, which seems to be a constant option in this game. The only problem with this is that he can then bring his tongue up and get a cheap hit on Donald. And if you dare get in its path, it does try and launch some fireballs at him, so just stay away from the snake and concentrate on the crow. Once the crow has been defeated, Donald gets the first lucky dime and can move on to the next location. Next I chose Hawaii because out of these three locations it can be a real pain due to some unfair stage hazards, which are not in themselves totally impossible but may take players a few tries to be able to get used to and tackle successfully. Therefore I always go to Egypt first and rinse those treasure rooms for lives, purely because my first time playing this again after all these years, I would die time and time again. On a positive note however, this level looks gorgeous and tropical as you would expect. Outside, Donald must firstly take care of the incoming enemies, but also flames emanating from the ground and lava being spat from a massive volcano in the background. So fire really does seem to be the theme here, as Donald faces it in many forms. So the start of this level can be a little tough. The music is good, and I do think that's what lulls players into a false sense of security. Anyway, if you can somehow get by the first set of obstacles, Donald enters what appears to be a building with a wooden door. Once inside, there is a barrage of fire coming to try and roast Donald. It's not too difficult this part, and getting the key you need is pretty straightforward. You just need to move very carefully to the respawning element that never seems to dissipate. The toughest parts of this stage involve ice cubes. The first is a bit cruel, but not too bad, and has our hero timing his jumps to try and cross a huge lava pit using these cubes. The only problem is that he can't just jump across straight away. He has to deal with hot drips, which will essentially destroy some blocks at certain points and then reappear, so timing is essential. This is again why I rinsed Egypt for lives, because this level is perhaps the most frustrating in the game. Make it through the first trap and they spring another one at you. This time Donald needs to descend below. However, blocking his path are, yes you guessed it, more ice cubes. Now this time you need to utilise the drips from the ceiling to melt the cubes. However, if Donald gets hit by one, then he naturally loses a hit point or life. Now the drips that drop appear to be somewhat random, so you must keep on the move. The more you can hold on, the further Donald will be able to climb down. This is the point where I think newcomers may struggle, because this is not easy. I do find that with patience and practice it does get maybe a little bit easier, and I have had occasions where I could do it without taking a hit, but there's nothing worse than dying time and time again, because it can be very aggravating. At least provided you have enough lives, you can try again right from the off. After this, Sega throw in another jump across the ice cubes right at the end, just to add insult to injury. Maybe I'm reading too much into this level, but as a kid I remember it being very stressful, and I'm not sure I even beat it back then. If you can get through this stage, then you must once again fight another crow. This one proceeds to drop bombs and dive bomb our hero. The trick is not to get too close and spam him, but keep your distance. This crow has a nasty close range attack consisting of bombs and a dive bomb attack. I would wait till he dive and then bounce off his head. After everything poor Donald has been through, at least the crow is surprisingly easy. Once he has been defeated, Donald has the second lucky dime and it's time to tackle the South Pole. Okay, so there's just one more level to get through before Majika's castle, and it is a little trip to the South Pole. Angry polar bears with a deadly chill attack, changing wind velocity and direction are just a few of the things that will get in Donald's way as he slips and slides his way in the freezing cold. This is not a particularly difficult level and is kind of refreshing as Egypt and Hawaii are both hot tropical levels, with, as you've discovered from this review, also have a fair number of traps. Basically in this stage you must get Donald to get to a cave at the far right hand side of the screen. Some of the things to watch out for are the wind direction and strength, which changes when he must jump over these platforms here. Also watch out for the sawfish jumping up and down. It is possible to jump on their noses and jump again to get some extra height and momentum in navigating your way across. I say possible because the collision detection is kind of off in this game, but more on that in the pros and cons section later on. I will say, just be careful as this game forces you to be super precise when jumping on the enemies. If you can make it through this part, then Donald enters the cave where he tackles a multitude of snowmen throwing snowballs, polar bears and a few different routes to choose, from which I thought was awesome. Regardless of which route you choose, you will eventually end up at the end. I would also take this opportunity to bash them polar bears if you can, because just like the treasure rooms in Egypt, you can rinse them over and over again as they respawn to try and get some extra lives. Whilst you can do that with every enemy in the game anyway, I do find it easier at this point as you can easily jump up or down to dodge them, and the timer is also generous. Once you are out of the cave, you must get by a few more enemies who make a last-ditched attempt to stop our hero in his tracks before you must face the final crow boss. This guy can be quite hard work to work out for first timers and can seem harder than he is, as he has some threatening attack patterns, such as throwing a constant respawning ice block, so the best way is to hit this guy with a frisbee as much as you can and kind of keep your distance. If you can time your shots accordingly, then you can get some much needed hits on it, especially once you destroy the ice block, and as the crow flies up, throw a frisbee whilst jumping, and 9 times out of 10 you will hit your target. I do find that again close attacks can be tricky and should only be done carefully. Eventually the crooked bird bites the dust. Rejoice, you've got the 3rd lucky dime and it's just one more stage to do. Okay, so you found all the nephews and managed to grab 3 of the 4 dimes from those pesky crows. Now you have no choice but to enter Majiki Dispel's creepy haunted castle and brave the many traps she has set to meet and defeat her. This castle makes Bowser's from the original Mario Brothers look like a walk in the park. There's just so much going on everywhere in this stage. Donald Duck does not really get a moment's respite from all the chaos in this level. As you would expect, everything is out to kill you, from flying cutlery to swooping ghosts and ghouls, not to mention skeletons who can rise from the ground like Baron Samedi from Live and Let Die. Newcomers and younger players may find this last level to be a real frustrating experience. Everything seems extremely overwhelming, and although not entirely impossible, you need lots and lots of lives. You see, this game's levels always start you off from the last checkpoint you were on, so it's entirely possible to get Donald through most of this tough stage with an excess of lives, as this allows you to practice the tough parts and get used to it. As you become more skilled, this level does get easier, I promise you. Like some of the other levels, this level does have a few branching paths, but I recommend just heading to the right. I didn't want to risk heading left, as I'm sure that this will backtrack the frustrated duck, and this was not a chance I was willing to take. This level forces you to rely on pinpoint timing and complete accuracy, just like in the other levels, but more so here. You must use some green lifts to progress upwards over a pit of spikes. Also suspended in mid-air are what only can be described as Lakitu's eggs. You must climb up here whilst avoiding or destroying the ghosts that hover back and forth, before timing a jump onto this green lift here, which takes you to the castle roof. No sooner have you set foot on what you hoped would be safe ground, but a barrage of ghosts float towards our hero and try and catch him out. There's also a lone skeleton at the exit waiting to attack you. If you try and rush through on the roof, then this may cost you a few more lives. Talk about overkill. So once again, you have to take your time and just plan every movement here. Now it's time for the most annoying part of the game. Yes, it's another green lift spike obstacle, and this one is extremely unfair. You see, this time Donald must try and get down, and unfortunately he has no choice but to rely on the tricky transport and must deal with lifts dropping down, rapidly putting him in danger, as well as the lift's changing speed, forcing him to get hit by rows of spikes. Now in theory this puzzle doesn't seem too hard. The problem I have is that because the game forces you to be 100% accurate, you cannot go anywhere near the spikes because you will take a hit or die. That's a very obvious statement, I hear you cry. Well, that means you can't even grace them at all. I mean, you can't even get into like a millisecond of them, even though you're not touching them, because if you're close to them, then again the game counts it as a hit. Also, when you get to the end of the puzzle, don't jump whatever you do, walk off and fall below, as jumping will mean Donald will get hit by the spikes above or at the sides. Once you've got past this point, the rest of the castle is relatively easy. You must deal with some green ghosts who emerge from mirrors, which is very cool, and possess suits of armour who use spears to block your path, so you need to time this section carefully and get past. Candle flame flies from the wick and falls on the ground, meaning that you need to jump over it carefully, and after this nightmare you can finally fight Magicka Dispel herself. You may have discovered that you can't bounce off her head, throw projectiles at her, or do anything to her, so how do you kill her, I hear you cry? Well, it can be very hard to miss, but there's a crystal ball on the table. As a kid I didn't even notice it and probably thought that it was part of the background. My tiny mind just couldn't comprehend what to do because Magicka starts throwing thunderbolts and bombs at Donald, killing him almost instantly before he even has a chance to get used to her. The trick is to stomp up and down multiple times on the crystal ball, and provided she hasn't killed you with her projectiles, the ball is destroyed and Magicka's reign of terror has ended. Now that you have all the lucky dimes, all that is left is to visit Uncle Scrooge, give him back his dime and collect the reward he promised our feathered friend. I can't wait. It could be anything. A house, a car, a speedboat. It's a lucky dime. A lucky dime after everything I've been through. A lucky dime, I get 10 lousy cents. Sure, it would probably make me rich in time, but I kinda wanted my Lamborghini or speedboat. Scrooge has no idea or appreciation of what I have just been through, so either them or a cash reward would have been amazing. So there you go guys, you get a score bonus but there's no credits and the game just goes back to the beginning. Graphics. This is one of the best looking games on the Sega Master System and just what you would expect from a Sega Disney game. You can tell right off the bat that there's a lot of care and attention in Donald and his trademark mannerisms. The other characters also look awesome as well. Each location looks good and I especially loved Egypt and Hawaii. I do feel that despite the game being somewhat difficult at times, the little humorous enemies and touches make me overlook this fact. I loved the animation on the mummified ducks and the blizzard effects in the South Pole. Magicka's castle also looked epic and I enjoyed the many baddies that Donald had to take down or avoid completely. The bosses, despite being somewhat easy, were just a joy to see and were really well animated. I do feel that they may seem unusual, but were also very original at the same time. I love the angry bear in the woods with the beehive on his head and the lion with his wicked fast charge attack, but my ultimate favourite out of all of them were the statues. In-game story and cutscenes. Well, this could have easily been a Disney Donald Duck cartoon. The intro is fantastic and lets you know exactly what is going on, with everything having a light-hearted feel. The story is just, in my humble opinion, a little lame. You mean to tell me that Magicka stole Scrooge's lucky dime and the nephews and their dimes so she could make money? I guess again I shouldn't read too much into this. After all, this is just a game made for younger players, but couldn't she just take out some stocks and shares or buy stock in a company? However, I did enjoy all the little cutscenes when Donald finds his nephew and their dimes, and of course the end of level scenes. There's even a little bit of trademark humour in which Donald gets a little greedy, wondering just what reward he will receive from finding Uncle Scrooge's dime. I guess if the game wasn't so difficult, I could accept the story more for what it was. It's just that it puts the unassuming player who thinks this is going to be a cute, easy Disney game through so much. Unless you know that this game plays unfairly and that you have to take your time, you won't get much enjoyment from it, sadly. Music. The music is absolutely brilliant to fit each stage well. I loved Hawaii's theme and also Magicka's boss theme. It's very well composed and it will get stuck in your head if nothing else. The Great American Forest and the South Pole do share the same music, but I often wondered why the developers didn't make a theme for the South Pole. I can only surmise that maybe they didn't have enough cartridge space, or perhaps they were on a deadline to get the finished product out quickly. As I mentioned earlier, Castle of Illusion was a huge success. Not just on the Genesis, but the 8-bit versions on the Master System was incredible. So maybe Sega were like, okay, let's try and get a game with Donald Duck out to capitalise on this success. Controls. The controls are a big part of the reason as to why this game can be quite challenging. Donald swings his weapon using button 1 and jumps with button 2. Unlike in many other platform games out at the time, poor Donald cannot adjust his jump once he is in the air. In many ways, if you are trying to do a running jump, then you must be sure that he will make it. Also, jumping kind of works against Donald at times, as the respawning enemies can somehow show up on screen and due to their awkward patterns may cost Donald a hit point or a life. Also, when hopping on certain enemies or bosses, you have to be framed perfect, in that each baddie must be hit in a precise position. If you are just a millisecond off, then you will easily be taken out of the game quite quickly, so you can't just rush through this game as you would any other. Great care must be taken, so unless you know this right away, expect to see the game over screen many times. With the hit detection also being a big problem, this is why this game gets a lot of hate. It wouldn't be so bad had the controls been a little freer and less rigid. Everything must be planned and timed almost perfectly to get Donald to make any kind of progress here, and that's a real shame and does take away a lot of the fun element of the game. Overall, okay, so can I recommend the Lucky Dime Caper? Just barely. As I've mentioned, it is nearly everything that makes a quality platform game from Disney and Sega. Honestly, the graphics, music, sound effects and animations are amazing and really shows off what the Master System can do when utilised well. However, the controls are just too fiddly and you can't really enjoy the platforming as much as you would like due to having to take things slower to cope with the respawning baddies and having to be super accurate, which is an ever recurring theme throughout the game. The Lucky Dime Caper is not terrible and it is worth a play, but it is nowhere near the standards set by the excellent Castle of Illusion. If you're a fan of Disney, then give it a go, but it just isn't up there as a must-have title. It is fun in parts and it's not totally unplayable. If you can adapt to the game's mechanisms, then you may be able to enjoy some elements from this title. So with that, I give the Lucky Dime Caper a quacktastic 3.9 out of 5. It's not the best platform game and will test your patience and frustration levels, but I can only recommend playing this if you want a challenge and are a fan of Disney and Donald Duck. So thank you very much, this has been Lucas Mackintosh and thank you for taking the time to check out my Retro Game Room review. Please don't forget to comment, like and subscribe to the support channel, keep checking back for new retro content, and please don't forget to give me some feedback as well. And join me next time as I put another 2 games through their paces in another Lucas Mackintosh Retro Game Review. Thank you so much and I'll see you next time.